when I was 19, I carried all this stuff with me, all this baggage of poverty and so on, spiritual and physical and material poverty. But I was ashamed of the material. I was ashamed of being poor, of having been poor. My whole family were ashamed of having been poor. Because if you're down, and people look down on you. They feel contempt for you. So I wasn't going around bruiting it about that I came from a poor family. And it took me a long time to overcome this shame.
But poverty is really a very central part of this story. You call it an epic of woe. And for someone who grew up in my generation in North America, I mean, the extent of poverty that you describe in the book and that you experienced is unimaginable.
It was bare. It was down to nothing. It was fundamental. When you're scrabbling around the streets of Limerick for lumps of coal or anything you can put in the fire, that's about as low as you can get.
It's not an Eric Siegel, love story where you just sit there and weep the whole time. I mean, there's this, if you don't laugh, you have to cry kind of humor. That's
what it is.
Was that part of the culture at the time?
If you don't laugh, you have to cry, and that was our way of dealing with everything. I think, or dealing with adversity. It was bizarre. It was crazy growing up in a society like that, because you had, on one hand, this slum, this juicy slum that we lived in, down at the bottom of a lane with a lavatory outside our door.
A public lavatory
for
all the other 11
for all the other families, yeah. So on that, and there was that, and then you'd go to mass, you go to church, you go to the Redemptorist Church, which was a couple of blocks away, or St. Joseph's, and you'd see the priests looking sleek and fat and glowing from the good food and the wine, the beef and so on, and then the church itself, ornate, expensive, gold leaf everywhere. And the fantastic vestments that the priests had. And then you're told, bring in sixpence to the school because they're collecting for the African missions to save the little black babies over there who might be going to hell. And it was all bizarre. We couldn't... How the hell did you figure this out? You're down at the bottom of a lane, practically starving. Then they want you to bring in money to send priests and nuns to Africa, China, and the Philippines. So you're puzzled all the time. They moved right. They gathered in saloons, and then they developed powerful political machines. They took over Tammany Hall in New York,
of course,
and this was their genius. Why couldn't they do that in Ireland? The church.
The church.
Yeah, the church was always interfering. If you do this, you do that, you're going to be excommunicated. My father, as a member of the IRA, was excommunicated. They were all excommunicated at one time. De Valera was excommunicated. They were always interfering. So we were pulled by the church.
I was particularly struck by how consumed he was with his dignity. In the face of all this poverty, this culture of alcoholism, it's the man who every morning had to have his collar and tie on before he went to work in farmers' fields to get the money to drink away in the pub, to come home and wake the children up. I mean, was that part of a source of part of his problem, that tremendous sense of dignity?
Yeah, you have to put on a face. You have to keep face. I think if you're black in America, you have to you realize you put on an act in certain situations. My father's act was to put on his collar and tie every day, and to put on his cap, and never showed that he was poor. My mother looked poor and dejected. She looked defeated. He would never look defeated. He would walk up the lane and would look neither to right or left. He wouldn't have anything to do with the neighbors. Of course, he was an outsider. But that if you're as I say in Ireland, if you're down with you, and he would never be down. He would never look down, and he'd never do the things that people usually do when they're down, like whine, beg, steal, anything like that. The next step would have been for my mother to put us in an orphanage. And that happened to a number of kids. But my mother had some pride left. I have my pride, she said. So she didn't put us in the orphanage. That if, for instance, when I was a teenager, at the threshold of adolescence, you discover your body. Your body becomes irresistible to you. And the church is saying, no. Because the big sin in Limerick was the Sixth Commandment. This is the one they always preached about. Thou shalt not commit adultery, which would have been a neat trick for a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. But it was defined as impure thoughts, impure words, impure deeds, which we boiled down to dirty, dirty things in general.